everybody. Nice to see you all. We'll just give it a minute or two just as more people start to roll in. Just confirm that we have all the speakers here and that they can get access to the controls, etc., that they need to have. But welcome. Okay, actually, there's a nice amount of people here right now, so I think let's get started. Imogen, you can be behind the scenes if and I'll stall if needs be, but let's go. We'll go for it. So yes, welcome everybody to the latest UKRI Circular Economy Hub webinar. This theme of this webinar, as you all know, is circular economy for SMEs, where we've invited people from three organisations, three SMEs that we've worked with through the NICER programme. And more directly through the Circular Economy Hub. For anybody that doesn't know who the Circular Economy Hub are, we're a UKRI funded project based at the University of Exeter. We're part of a broader programme called the NICER programme, National Interdisciplinary Circular Economy Research Programme, which has been running since 2020. We're in our final year now, so the last stretch for the final 6 months, and we're starting to sort of pull together key learnings, key takeaways from the project, and our work on SMEs and work with SMEs even has been a big part of that. And yeah, we run these monthly webinars, and I'll go through some housekeeping before we introduce the speakers. So the webinar is being recorded, be made available via the website and the YouTube channel. If you don't want to be in the recording, please keep your cameras off and your microphones on mute. If you have any questions you want to ask the speakers, you can pop them in the chat. There'll be time for Q&A at the end of the conversation after all three speakers have spoken. However, if there's one or two, really directly relevant questions to each speaker after they've spoken, maybe I'll pick those up as and when. So feel free to pop them in the chat throughout. Don't save them all to the end. And that's about it, really. I mean, it's an exciting webinar, and it's a great bunch of speakers that we've got with us today. So Ari Katz from Round Rack, Seb Sabon from Twist, and Karishma Gupta from Islando Circular Fashion. I'll let them introduce themselves more properly when they start talking. But the exciting sort of dimension of this group of people in particular, and the focus on SMEs, is that there's huge potential for circular economy to have an impact within the SME community. In the UK, they account for 99.9% of businesses, employing something like 16 million people across over 5 million businesses. So massive potential for impact, not just in the implementation of circular economy practices within their organizations, but as key enabling functions, often for other circular economy practices and processes for other businesses to adopt. So some really key insights coming out of this webinar, through the specific things that people are working on, but also more generally as people working within or running SMEs and trying to sort of get involved in this exciting area. So that's about enough from me. So I will hand over to Ari Katz from Round Rack, who should be able to share their own slides with you now. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Do you hear me, first of all?
We do.
Perfect. So part one is a success. Part two will be sharing my screen.
Yep.
Let's see how that goes. And do you see my slides?
We don't currently.
How about now?
No.
Okie dokie. Let's see. Couldn't access your camera. Let's try another one. How about now?
We still can't. I wonder if we may kindly reverse the order just so that we can figure this out. Perhaps sending the slides to Imogen or something so that we can.
I do have them here. I can share them if you want. You can ask me to move them on if you like, Ari.
Okay, let's try to do that. I can meanwhile introduce myself and begin. Oh, there we go. You'll notice on the bottom it says September 22, and I purposely chose or edited an older deck, which is very much the deck we used before or during when we applied for the grant, and it really probably presents more of what was happening then in real time, because obviously things changed a lot since then. So I guess you could just go. I guess I'll mention like next slide. Okay, so I'll start telling our story chronologically and explain how we sort of came about working with the NICER program. I actually come from a tech background. I don't come from fashion, and we're a fashion-based project. During COVID, I got interested in sustainability, circular fashion. I met online actually through the Ellen MacArthur Foundation my co-founder, Alicia Gotti, who was a sustainable textile agent. And we came to understand that in today's fashion industry, brands are just unable to understand and work with new materials. Coming from a technology background, the way I saw it is they're simply, or the opportunity here is them integrating innovation into their organization, and so very much the low tech process of taking materials and working or putting it into their supply chain. We were trying to think of how we can bring that up to speed with technology. Next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide, or I don't control it, do I? Yeah, there we go.
Sorry,
Okay,
is it it's moving on for me? Is it moving on for you?
Yeah, now it is. Yeah, right. So basically, what we discovered is that when brands are working with new materials, now we just see your Windows backgrounds. When brands are working with new materials, there's a lot of more questions involved. Today, in general, when every brand has more sustainability considerations, things just become a lot more complicated. You suddenly get your legal teams, your marketing teams involved. It makes the project much longer, much more complicated, while the fashion brands themselves don't necessarily have more time or a larger budget for working with these new materials. So we went out to really try and find a solution to get the new materials on par with the regular materials that brands are working with. Next slide, please. And basically working with a very complex system that looks like this. Next slide, please. Into a more simple system that looks like this. So we were very much what we consider an enabler. So we were really out there to help other SMEs work with, or let's say when we say SMEs, we're actually talking about textile suppliers, textile and material innovators, helping them collaborate and work with and sell to fashion brands, because there's a huge gap, and we believe that we were able to really close that gap with technology. Next slide, please. Okay, this is actually just a GIF. I'm not even sure it's gonna work properly, so we can skip to the next slide. But basically created a platform that is what we call a single source of truth for a material project. So any material, at least from the brand side, you might be working with multiple suppliers, multiple innovators. Each one is a completely different material. They communicate different aspects of sustainability, of circularity. And our goal really was to align, from the brand's perspective, all the materials and suppliers they're considering, but in general, just to close this communication gap. So we believe it's a communication gap. Next slide, please. Now, pretty much what was at the core of our project in the context of this grant is that the grant we applied for, we actually needed, I would call it the blessing of the Textile Circular Center, which is part of the Royal College of Arts. And what was interesting is that at the time they were looking for what doesn't really exist in the industry, and that is like a single way to assess materials in regards to their sustainability. Because again, today, and still today, every brand can communicate whatever he wants. There's no regulations. There's no single way of measuring, no single way of communicating it. And basically, the core of the project, we basically collaborated with the Royal College of Arts and ourselves, and we created, again, and this is very tricky in the industry, not saying what is good or what is bad, but really just simplifying and communicating the different aspects of sustainability. Basically, I think it was 7 or 8 points: soil pollution, air pollution, waste, biodiversity, water saving, social impact, farmer livelihood, and animal welfare. And again, this also wasn't, I would call like a reference for the brands and for the suppliers to really try and align themselves in order just to work better together. So that was really the core of our project. We got basically 2 design partners, both a brand and a supplier, and we built the platform out for them. We sort of launched it, and we got a lot of interesting feedback from both sides. And basically, the exploitation plan, which is a big part of the project, is really then launching this to more customers. Next slide, please. I think basically that's what's important. The rest is really part of the exploitation plan. So again, what we believed is really being an enabler. So a lot of it was about supplying both sides with more, I guess you can call it, technical solutions and helping them facilitate projects. So really, it isn't necessarily about telling one side or the other what is sustainable, but again, it's really just helping them simplify and communicate what they already have, get everyone aligned on the same page, whether it's with chat capabilities or having, again, simple things like an NDA available for both sides to see at any given time. Next slide, please. This is somewhat of, again, our business model. Next slide, please. And our wonderful team. I think, again, a big help with the project and with the type of company and product like this is really having a lot of good advisors that can help open doors in the fashion industry. Next slide, please. And again, really, this isn't necessarily the exact order, but the program and the grant project really help us open more doors. I would say really helped us also develop a relationship with the Textile Circular Center and the RCA. We raised money pretty much around the same time. We partnered with the UN, and we have a lot of plans moving forward with really exploiting and developing the capabilities and learnings that we had from that project. And that's about it. So thank you very much, and I'd be glad to hear if anyone has any questions, I guess, later.
Yeah, thanks, Ari. Very interesting. If anybody has a specific question that they want to pose now to Ari about Round Rack or their experiences, feel free to do so. But if not, please drop them in the chat or keep them for later, and we'll pick them all up in the discussion at the end. Yep. So thank you. I think Seb, you're next.
Hi, everyone. So yes, I'm Seb from Twist. I hope you guys can see my screen now. I am the co-founder and chief product officer, and we've also been on a bit of a journey since the inception that I'm going to try and capture sort of like that journey, and also how important the grant project with NICER and the collaboration that we had with both Innovate UK and SEAB has had on that journey, and how we have landed up today, where we are today. So I'm gonna start with like where we started, kind of like makes sense, and then hopefully you guys will be able to follow like the red thread through to like where we're at today. But we started Twist in 2021. Me and my co-founder Will, we both have a hardware background before having a fairly long career in software. But we were both quite disillusioned and also like a bit frustrated with the with sort of like, especially in the sort of venture sort of like landscape, sort of like the lack of focus and lack of funding that it's sort of like coming into like the hardware space, and also, and as we know, like the climate problem is not going to be solved by pixels. So essentially we sort of like set out and we did some research. We both kind of like latched on to like the circular economy as like a clear solution to how a lot of problems could potentially be solved. And we did quite a lot of interviews and with hardware companies and especially like trailblazers in the space, primarily in the mobility space, who were operating like different business models that were where they were like taking more responsibility for the product throughout the life cycle. And initially we started Twist as sort of like an analytics platform for those type of companies. So we essentially said, we essentially posed a question like, how would you measure sort of like the performance of a life cycle throughout its life, and how could you potentially predict that so that you can make better decisions for your products and for your business now. So we set out to do that, and we had like an early prototype. We built what we called like a live LCA, so like a way for you to like measure your life cycle digitally and at any given point, so like a bit more dynamic than just doing like a report a year. That was essentially our initial proposition. We then applied for a grant with NICE in order to go a little bit deeper, so like being able to build like a true sort of a digital twin, not just for assets but also for components. As I mentioned, we worked quite heavily in the sort of like mobility space early on, and there are things like batteries and other type of components play a huge part in how you measure like the impact and the performance of an asset throughout the life cycle, and it sort of can produce different metrics. So we did that with NICE, and I think we interviewed over like 20 different OEMs all across the spectrum from mobility all the way down to sort of like more static sort of like energy storage companies. And after we finished the program, which was super helpful and gave us quite a lot of like legs down, and we came out of the program with a completely new data model, new data schema, new API, and a lot of new insights that we could produce for our customers. We went into like a bit of I think the later part of 2022, beginning of 2023, a bit of like a stagnation with the main question that we got back from our current customers, and also like customers who might have been in a little bit more of a difficult position themselves, was sort of like, what can they do with this data now that they have it in front of them? So obviously there were things to do with like improving the operations, but also and also like obviously like the whole like environmental side of things were super important. But the main thing that came back after talking to the majority of our customers and potential customers was, it would be really good if we could utilize this data to be able to interface with our banking partners or potential banking partners. And we started pulling this thread and a little bit more, and realized that a lot of new hardware assets, especially if they were operating a different model that banks weren't used to, found it really difficult to get any type of financing, whether that being venture capital, whether that being like debt financing or a credit line, because the banks essentially finds it a bit too risky. So some of our customers had already tried to do this with like twist data, like taking screenshots and putting it in front of banks, and still getting no, but this is interesting. So we essentially said, okay, we think that there might be a bigger problem to solve here, rather than just providing the data, but basically being like a partner for these type of companies who are looking for more financing to get a bigger scale. And maybe we can be true to our mission of like how do we power more circular hardware into the space by also bringing the capital. So we used the models that we built through the nice R&D project, and also like our other models, and we built like an internal scorecard for ourselves, and we did like some of our own lending first. Neither of us have any financing experience, so this is all sort of like with the help of like some friends and just like some guesses. And we said we were going to allocate some of our own money to try it out, and then we're going to use that as sort of a case study to show banks that how this could work. So we did some of our own lending, and then we utilized sort of like that data and our own and the outcome of that experiment to show financial institutions that how good these type of businesses are, and like how they should score them, and how you can use like predictive modeling to look into the future of these businesses rather than just using like historical data, because all financial institutions find it really easy to finance like diesel trucks and vans, etc., because there's so much historical data on it. But with newer type of hardware, like anything with a battery or any type of newer asset, and with new business model, we find that a lot more difficult. So we used that. We signed up a few financial institutions to use our data platform. We never intended to become a lender ourselves. That's not what we wanted to do. We just wanted to sit in the middle and help the hardware companies primarily. We raised the seed round, and we also did that together with another Innovate UK grant, which we're currently working on, which focuses on basically building the framework for circular financing, where we now have a working group of about 15 financial institutions, including the big retail banks in the UK, like NatWest and HSBC, etc. And we have now built a platform that eventually uses the same type of data modeling that we had like from the start, but it's now more focused on being this like shared data room where a hardware company can upload the data like they did before, and then share that data room with like potential lenders, and lenders can use that with their internal scorecarding and risk management to basically like make decisions around how much and what type of funding they can provide. And we do this for not only for mobility now. So we have a few projects in the energy storage. We're also like extending it into other types of hardware like heat pumps, and we're talking to a few solar ones. But the main thing is that they have to have some sort of business model where they are taking control of the product throughout the life cycle. So not just selling outright. So that could be, and sometimes it's leasing, which we do quite very little of, but most of the times it's some sort of like hardware as a service, or whether it's like sort of like pay per use type model, where the asset operator essentially has ownership of the product throughout. And that's what, and yeah, so that's what so we started out as like an analytics platform and ended up in a fintech. And I guess that the old trope of like build a startup in London long enough and you eventually become a fintech, I guess. But yeah, so this is just a bit of like the back end of like how it actually works. So we sit sort of like, we have essentially built like a data layer that sort of like sits in between the borrower and the lender, where all of the control basically sits with the borrower. They have control of like all of the data. They can see all of it first, and then they can invite lenders to view and the lender can utilize that data internally to create their own like investment memos, and then we can manage the loan all the way through to the end, to make sure that not just that they are meeting sort of like the covenants that were set up around the financial performance, but also around circularity, so that they have sort of like they have like a repair and strategy. They're also like looking at, oh, sorry. Sorry, someone was playing with the stereo there. So, but yeah, that's essentially what we do. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Seb, and welcome addition of some music at the end there.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Mark, sure, you have your hand up, so I guess you have a question directly for Seb.
Yes, thank you. I did put it in the Q&A, but I guess we could just ask it here. So I've had a quick look at Twist's website, and your current focus is around fleet operations and electric vehicles. Would your platform lend itself well to the hydrogen market? That's my question for you. I have reached out to you on LinkedIn as well. If it's not maybe suitable for now,
I can ask it answer that quickly, and hopefully without music interruption. And I don't know what's going on in the studio today. Our website is currently under development, but as you say, it sort of has a bit of like the old information in there. But the answer is it's kind of like it's a little bit driven by the lenders, so what they are interested in. So, and it would also be depending on like how that hardware company and how they score essentially in terms of circularity using hydrogen. We don't have any hydrogen projects currently, but I think we would probably be open to have a look, if that makes sense. But it will depend a bit on like what the lenders also want to see.
Yeah, that's fine. I just need to maybe know a little bit more about the platform. We've actually got our bank, Lloyds, and a Qatari-based sovereign wealth fund interested in our projects, but we need to see what your platform can offer for that. But thank you.
Yeah, cool. We're happy to have that conversation with you offline.
Thanks both. Yeah, thank you very much, Seb. So Karishma is up next, please.
I'm gonna share my screen. All right, cool. Are you guys able to see the full screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So, hi, I am Karishma, founder and CEO of Islando. We are a circular fashion tech company on a mission to accelerate textile recycling. I'm a fashion technologist, and I have worked overseas in large manufacturing houses in textile making, and I've seen the industry inside out. So we exist because the fashion recycling is broken. All major brands have net zero targets, and they're demanding more recycled fabrics. But the reality is that less than 1% or 1 million tons of textiles are recycled back into new clothing. So by 2030, the annual demand for fiber is set to be about 150 million tons. And in order for the fashion industry to meet the net zero targets, there's a shortfall of 133 million tons of low impact material. So that's almost 90% replacement needed in the next 5 years, actually. So therefore, in order to solve this problem and provide real value to the industry, we took on the project of industrial research to enhance consumer experience and circular supply chain in fashion through digital product passport. And we're very grateful for the CE Hub and Innovate UK to help us develop our work. So this project has been a journey, and in order to do this massive research on an industrial level, we divided our project into 5 key work packages, and the development of all the packages have been happening parallelly. I'll try my best to make sense of our extensive findings and development, and our project is currently ongoing, and it'll complete in October of this year. So starting starting with our first work package, which was circular design development, which was with the objective to design 15 unique circular designs, which are close to fast fashion, improve the products and processes in that. So when it comes to fast fashion, a big way to cut costs and increase efficiency is to use interlinings and to give the seams a dimensional stability. So interlinings are barely visible but affect the recyclability of the garment. So we were successful in creating designs without interlinings, but the biggest challenge was the availability of concealed zippers, which is widely used in the fast fashion industry. And we were trying to make monomaterial clothing. We were hit by high MOQs, lead times, and realistically, the innovation in circular designs in the wider industry, in the wider supply chain, is far behind. So, however, we found all these remanufacturing and recyclability strategies. We found that we could deliver from our work package 3, which I'd like to take on first. So the circular supply chain object exploration, which was to identify key players in the post-consumer, pre-consumer, all waste industries, and to develop a circular supply chain so that all the clothes can come back to the loop. So we have been successful in mapping the entire recycling chain and recyclers chain and the UK's collection chain. We have interviewed, onboarded and acquired guidelines from almost 40 recyclers. That is almost 40% of the recycling industry who we are connected to, and they are interested in us thanks to this project. So we were able to analyze the waste landscape. The 1% of recycled fibers are almost entirely made from post-industrial waste, which are a manufacturing waste. The big problem is that once the clothes are stitched, there is no way to identify the full material composition and the chemical safety of them. So we did a small manual analysis to get started. We took on the guidelines, looked at tech packs of over 200 designs and pulled out the key recycling information. And we started manually to match SKUs with the recyclers based on the guidelines. And we found that over 80% of the clothes were recyclable and they were cheap to recycle. Also, I'd like to point out that the brands that we worked with on this manual matching research, that they had little to no training in circular designs. So I wondered if theoretically it is possible, then what are the practical problems? So why are we stuck at 1% recycling rate of textiles? So in order for you to understand this, I'd like to tell you 3 stories. So why doesn't recycling work? So Susan, imagine she's the head of sustainability at the brand. She has to source recycled fabrics to hit the net zero targets, as well as set up a circular supply chains to meet up the regulations. Her brand is almost always held responsible every time their clothes are pictured in landfill. Tudor, he runs a sorting hub. He collects all of London's old clothes, resells what he can, and then he pays for sending the remaining 85% to landfill. Deepak, you can imagine him as the CEO of recycling company. His problem is that he can't buy enough feedstock to fulfill the demand from brands. So for our recycler to actually recycle the textile, they need all of this data per product. Things you can see, such as fabric decoration, and things you can't, such as the stretchy material, elastane, chemicals. And based on all of this data, he decides if it's commercially viable for them to recycle it. So, but as you can see, there is no way for Tudor to gather all that information to sort this pile of clothes. So that link that provides the data to sorters and recyclers is basically missing. So in order to solve this problem, we have a solution to unblock the recycling system. We have innovated a way to convert all of this information into a scannable QR code, and we are developing a AI-powered sorting software so that we can sort textiles for recycling within 1 second. And all of this data, we can track that to feed that information back to brands. So we are developing a digital product passport in the form of a QR code, which brands can stitch into their clothes. Textile collectors could use our AI-powered sorting software and make money from clothes that would otherwise go to landfill. And our recyclers get access to feedstock at scale, which they can recycle and resell profitably. So how our solution is kind of differing from the methods that are out there, such as manual and NIR sorting, is garments are quite complex. They have linings and components and a lot of things in them. And then there's elastane in it, which is twisted within inside the thread of each each fiber of the garment, basically, we can say that. And it's quite transparent, so NIR can just directly passes through it, and they can never detect elasting. On top of that, the chemical safety of the garment. All of this we are able to do through data. So there are problems. I'll come back to them later in the presentation. So coming back to our digital circular ID system, which is we call Relabel. It's divided into 3 categories, which is databasing, QR code generation, and then serving the data to our stakeholders. If you are to visualize our tech, which is we take the tech pack, we database the SKU, we structure all of that data back, and then generate a QR code, which goes onto the clothing as a digital twin, and which can be picked up by sorters. So we have heavily used AI. We're bringing the offline industries online. Majority of fashion brands, they are small. 90%, there was a start, about 85% of the fashion brands out there have only 2 or 4 full-time working people. So we are making that easy. So we're using the system that they use, which is a deck pack, and we structure it. Then recyclers kind of input their data in a natural language, and then it goes into our own main dashboard. There's a life cycle assessment in our project as well, which was quite tricky for us to do, but we established our system boundaries to kind of understand what is the actual impact of widespread textile recycling. So we saw what the boundaries of our system was. Where is the carbon emission? Majority of it, when we talk about the end of life supply chain, first is the raw material, which is a virgin product, and then end of life. So about 38% of all the carbon emissions from fashion comes from the virgin material production, and 3% of it comes from end of life, which is they are incinerated or they are in the landfills. So we kind of created our system boundaries. I'd love to speak to you if you can grab me on side, and I can speak to you on this for length. So we kind of we created a model, and we calculated that by recycling about 16 million tons of old clothes in the next 10 years and replacing the emissions from producing virgin fibers at the end of, as well as the end of life disposal, we will deliver like 63% reduction in emission. So that comes about almost 50 megatons of carbon emission, and that is close to planting 1 billion trees. And if you look at how much forest area we'd need to plant 1 billion trees, is the entire of UK. So that's great. Amazing. So in the close, I would like to ask for help. Please help us spread the word. We want to speak with as many brands, recyclers, waste management companies, and experts who are facing this issue. We are here to help them solve this problem. You can connect with us on LinkedIn. And this is us, Eslando, connecting products with recyclers for brand. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karishma. And thanks to all of our speakers. We have a question in the chat which came through when you were speaking. So I assume it's directly to you. So does the chemical recycling of plastic work on a commercial scale yet?
There are a few. There are a few who are doing chemical recycling at scale. There was one with cellulosic or Renewcell. They are kind of in troubles right now, but they will survive for sure. And there are a few in the States as well who are doing it.
Thank you.
But yeah, the scale that we need is about 49 million tons of fibers, and we are kind of at the scale of 1 million ton. And then by the end of this decade, it's going to be close to 10 to 50 million tons.
Brilliant, thank you. So yes, we now have 20 minutes, so a nice amount of time for conversation, some more questions. So please feel free to either pop up your digital hand, as Mark Shaw has just done. So please ask your question, Mark, or pop questions in the chat, the Q&A function, if you don't want to speak them out loud, and I will pose them to the speakers. So thanks. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, and thank you to Ryan and Imogen for hosting today. So I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, iChemie, and the Royal Society of Engineers. I'm a geochemist, an engineer, I guess, a bit of an innovator. I've been following the circular economy really closely, and it's something I'm very passionate about. And one of the technologies I've come across is plasma gasification, which kind of sits in the circular economy for the reuse of complex synthetic materials and also waste materials that are very mixed. Could I ask from maybe Karishma, do you see gasification as a potential technology to help with the more mixed or contaminated wastes to really champion the more complex side of this circular economy question we're trying to fix?
I don't know. If I'm honest, I don't know what the science behind gasification is. The biggest problem, if we talk about fashion or fiber waste, is the length of the fiber that kind of affects the quality of the garments that we are wearing. When you look at synthetics being recycled, it's pretty easy. You can turn them, polymerize them, and you can create them into pellets, and then that can go into making as long fiber as you need. When it comes to cellulosic, cotton gets chemically or something in a way that the fiber kind of converts into viscose, and that is a shorter length fiber. Now, I'm not fully aware where gasification of such elements would exist. Garments are in quite heavily mixed. They are pretty much a mini laptop in their own way, which are not electronic. They have metals, they have zippers, and they heavily use quite a lot of different types of chemicals on it. So those are the challenges. Like, how can we maintain the fiber length and get rid of all the dyes and stuff like that?
Yes, thank you. So, because I was recently at the Chartered Institute of Waste Managers AGM, and they see, the meeting was kind of hosted by Suez, who are obviously a massive waste processing company. They see that the biggest problem is the types of waste that are most in mass processed at volume. So, like the big questions that Suez have problems with is when they deal with a lot of general waste, is that general waste is becoming more and more complex as the technologies that we throw away, especially in waste electricals, is now just becoming part of the normal waste stream now. I understand from your perspective the sort of garments industry, and we do see in the UK that the waste garments industry is almost becoming bit more prominent, so people can choose to dispose of fabrics in dedicated fabric recycling or reuse bins, and then the charities or the organizations that process them either then make decisions to put them back on resale, which is great for the best part of the circular economy, or then they choose to then send them off for recycling. Obviously, clothes is only a very small part of the textiles industry. Obviously, we all wear clothes, but you look around your house, you've got curtains, you've got bed sheets, you've got upholstery fabrics. I'm unfortunately through my passions, I'm in touch with the Carpet Waste Recycling Institute. They've got some massive problems, as in nobody wants to touch carpet tiles. Nobody wants to touch carpets because of the very complex glues, and like a lot of carpet is underlaid with rubbers. It just makes it a complex material.
Yeah, same goes for curtains as well. They have resins in them to make them to black out them. But these kind of materials, I could point out is carpets and curtains and these household goods. They have a lot more use and a lot bigger life. You will change your curtain once in 10 years, but you will change your t-shirt every day 3 times pretty much. So the volume of textile clothing waste is quite huge. And reselling is still only 15% of all the collection.
Super, thank you.
Thanks both. Mike, feel free to ask your question.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's really good presentations. There's lots going on, and that's really encouraging. I guess my question is around what's the most effective way to get these things into use. So I'm thinking here about extended producer responsibility and perhaps using that as a vehicle to set up a more nationally strategic way of dealing with this, particular hub centers where these technologies can be more easily deployed, so that we're, you know, sucking everything up into the system and then it can be redistributed to the right place. Because it seems to me at the moment that one of the biggest barriers is the numbers of people out there that aren't necessarily connected to what's going on, and the fact that it's simply probably too dispersed. I mean, I'm a fan of distributed networks, but they still need structure to work. So that's it's an observation, but it's a question: is do you think that's what would help?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Anybody want to? Any of our speakers want to reflect? Ari is still here as well, off camera.
Can you read the question?
Yeah. So, oh yeah, go for it, Mike.
Yeah, basically using extended producer responsibility, because I think, as you know, Mark was saying, that the fact is that there are a number of textiles as well as clothes. So to have the ability to you know, collect everything up into the system, send it to you know, strategic hubs that are located, you know, geographically suitably, shall we say, and then to apply these technologies and techniques to the materials so that they can be sorted much better and then sent to the right fate effectively, so that we're maximizing the opportunity to you know, recover materials and recycle the products.
Right. So are you asking if that's a good idea?
Yeah.
I mean, 100%. To me, that sounds like a legitimate project. I do know that, again, we were very wary and careful about getting into the LCA, the scoring, let's call it game. I think you have to have the right credentials and you have to have the right partners to do so. So again, we didn't go down that road. We basically said we will be an enabler, we will be a facilitator, provide us with those scores, with the information that is relevant, and we will communicate it maybe in a more orderly and simple fashion to the other side. Our idea as being a platform actually was exactly to later integrate external providers, whether it's LCA or anyone else. But definitely some of the biggest challenges of the industry, the fashion industry specifically, is having one of these tools or modules that is adopted. So again, it's very hard to sort of force it. It's definitely I don't want to say saturated, but it's definitely a competitive space and competitive landscape. But I think in terms of a project funded by and with interest to NICER program and Innovate UK, to me it sounds very relevant.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I was just looking at the scale and the fact that it seems that the complexity of this is actually causing markets to fail at the moment. So it's kind of looking at a way to clean that up and to use as much sort of AI and mechanization in the process as possible. And that you know, to deal with a big problem, you need facilities at scale.
100%. I'll just add one more thing. I mean, I completely agree. I think it's important to keep in mind simplification. Again, I guess different industries act differently. Not everyone might have an expert in-house that can completely, I would say, manage such a project from their side. So the simpler the outcome is, and the least work that perhaps a design partner will need to provide, minimal manpower, the better chances you have. So again, that's sort of in the real world, and at least in the fashion industry. it could definitely be interesting, I think, to explore in the context of a grant project, at least as far as I think.
Thanks, that's great.
If I could add to that, I feel in your question, which is like, how do we solve this problem? Like the biggest end of circular economy, obviously both tie in together, is the end of life and how do we design a product. So end of life is specifically speaking from that side. In order to solve this problem, we need three kind of actions in it. So we need a policy level action, which is from EPRs and which is from enforcement of those policies and creating right policies for that. Second is development of the infrastructure and funding the infrastructure. We are kind of creating the infrastructure, the technology to sort textiles. And the third is the commercial opportunity in the entire waste industry. Quite a few Eastern countries are very successful in commercializing the recycling industry. So we kind of have to look at the perspective of waste as not waste, but a commercial opportunity from there, like providing real value to the end of life stakeholders. So if we can do these three things, we can definitely solve the problem.
Yeah, thanks, Karishma. Mark, I see you have your hand up. I'm just rattle through a couple of the questions that have been put in the chat and the Q&A so far. Lots of conversation about sort of textile recycling outside of clothing. There are a few questions that are aimed at Karishma specifically, but I'll try and draw out the broader ones first, if I can. So there's a question: what are the current business models available to bring back used garments, apparel products ended up in different parts of the world, especially in developing countries, if any? So yeah, Karishma, Ari, or Seb, feel free.
So in terms of business models to bring back the used garment, India has a very good recycling industry for textiles, like in Patiala, in Punjab, near Punjab. So they have set up a full-on sorting hub, and waste dumping is not allowed in India. So it's quite very well managed. Whereas the African countries as well as South American countries have to kind of look at those business models and see what we can do with the waste. Their insulation paddings are very easy kind of industry. So there is a waste industry. It should be, I agree with few of the ESPR regulations, that is, waste should not be moved to countries with low recycling infrastructure. And yeah, it's valuable waste. In post-industrial waste, it can cost anywhere from 80 pounds per ton to anything. That's the margins are low, but the volumes are high in that.
Thanks, Karishma. Another general comment, selfishly coming from myself, and perhaps Seb can pick this one up first, is, as SMEs, and you're all working with other SMEs, as you sort of enter into this space, have there been any particular barriers that you face that you feel perhaps larger organizations don't face or wouldn't face, or opportunities, what the opportunities available to you as you're working in this circular economy area?
There's lots of, like the main opportunity about working with SMEs is like that you have access to like the right people, and you can make like people, like just in general, like the decisions are being made quicker. There's a lot more innovation, obviously, like with the bigger organizations, they tend to move quite slower. But then I guess like the hurdle is like working on a smaller scale is that the impact you're trying to measure becomes a lot smaller. Like a lot of the bigger impact you can have is by like converting like bigger companies to make better decisions, obviously. So I guess that's an opportunity and a challenge that a lot of us is facing.
Yeah, thanks, Seb. Conscious of the time, we've only got 5 minutes left, but Mark, would you like to pose a question?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that everybody on this call needs to understand is, if you are operating in the waste or reuse sector, it's very important just to apply to be a member of the organisations like the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, just because they support the policy making in this sector. And what I've learned from that is you get to basically sit with the big companies that are basically going to potentially aid or derail your circular journey. So we basically found out that companies like Suez, Biffa, Veolia, they all exist not actually to manage waste, but what they do is they mine waste to basically get the important materials out so they can basically make money. And anything they can't, obviously they either export or put to landfill. My question is, I guess it's more of a statement, but my question is just to make sure that you stay informed by following the sort of different organisations that manage the circular economy and its rollout in the UK. But thanks everyone for joining today, and thanks again to Ryan and Imogen for hosting.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, it's a really good point. You know, and I guess, you know, having those spaces for collaboration, you know, sharing ideas, you know, it's vitally important, as hopefully is being demonstrated by the CE Hub monthly webinars. Any final questions for any of the speakers? There were a few specific questions for Karishma that perhaps I'll forward on to you, you know, about the sort of workings of your project. But otherwise, I can't see anything else coming in or any hands going up specifically now. So yeah, I just want to say thanks again for all the speakers for joining. You know, we had a good group of people for this lunchtime session, so hopefully you've been able to feed your mind as well as your stomachs. Yeah, Mark's popped a comment around connecting on LinkedIn. Would encourage everybody to connect with everybody, of course, and share ideas. Next webinar coming up next month, so keep an eye out on the website. Imogen has pasted a link into the chat. If you could provide any feedback for the webinar series, we'll be running them throughout the year, so it'd be great if we can incorporate any useful changes. But otherwise, yeah, thank you for coming, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Enjoy the rest of your
everyone.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, sir.